Welcome to 10 Forward, where our goal is to bring fun back to Star Trek. Please have a seat. The show will begin in a moment. We hope you enjoy. Peace and long life.
Okay, I am very sorry about what happened there. I honestly cannot tell you what happened. My everything went blank, and I just finally got back. So everybody, unmute mics. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but anyway, welcome to our 10 Forward Roundtable, where we do nothing but want to talk fun about Star Trek. And tonight, our panel is going to be talking about the Next Generation episodes. I'd like to introduce my regulars on the panel, the Ambassador, Mr. Myrr, and I have two very special guests. We have Jack Beers and Brian, the Master of None?
Yes, sir. How you guys doing?
Hello.
All right,
Hey.
awesome. So
Hi.
I kind of want to go. So I kind of want to go into a little bit here about. Let's be honest here. Okay, we could talk all day about the current climate of Star Trek. Now, let's not even go there because that's not what this is about. Let's go to 1980. Was it 6 when the Star Trek Next Generation came out, or was it 87?
87.
87. So let's look at it this way. At this point, you've had 78 episodes because I don't believe The Cage had been released at this point for public consumption. You've had 4 movies now and all original cast. We are talking about 4 really legitimately from especially 2 to 4 successful movies. And a show that has been in the syndication for a few decades now. Now you have this crazy idea of, hey, let me bring my show back. Let me give it a new crew. Let me not reboot it. Let me push it in the future. And the idea is, I mean, when you think about the idea back then, that almost makes no sense. I mean, it's like, okay, well, you've made us some money off these movies. We're going to give you a shot. But, if you watch several interviews, especially early on, most of these folks, they didn't believe especially Patrick Stewart, didn't believe for a second this show was going to last past the first season because it wasn't expected to. So, I mean, it had all the pressure of having to please people because all they knew at that point was the original cast. So this was whole new territory. This was the okay, it's either going to work and we're gonna be able to expand on Star Trek, or it's gonna fail and we are never gonna recover from this. I mean, you're talking make or break. Talk about pressure. And I don't think, I mean, I have to be honest, in today's social media climate, I don't think it would have made it.
Well,
What do you
I
guys-
do. I definitely do. See, the only reason why I would say that is you're talking about the demographic, and the reason why Star Trek, the first Star Trek, was canceled in the first place, and that was because it was only saying like one particular demographic, which were males of a certain age range, let's say 13 to 39, and so it really didn't expand outside of that demographic. The problem is because of the way they reviewed, they did ratings, they didn't see how many people were watching Star Trek at the time. And, you know, once it went away, people were pissed off. They, you know, there was just such a huge swath of that particular demographic. So when it went into syndication, this is where you start realizing how much it took off, because they did their ratings according to like numbers of households watching instead of breaking it down by demographic. So you had again these huge numbers of people in a certain sex and a certain age range watching Star Trek every week. So yes, I mean I absolutely agree with you. There was huge pressure on season 1 to make or break, but at the same time, I do believe very strongly it would have been successful regardless.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ambassador, what do you think?
Well, honestly, for me, this was the Star Trek I grew up on as a kid, because in 1986, I was still in if I remember correctly, I was in elementary school. And when I heard that there was a new Star Trek coming out and everything, I was like, or 87, excuse me. I was like, holy cow. I was like, I had seen a couple of the TOS movies and everything, like Final Frontier and Undiscovered Country. And I was like, yeah, I'll check this out. Absolutely. I even remember when when TNG premiered and everything where I live, they were actually running the 1980s version of Dune and everything, which Star Trek Studio as Gurney Halleck, and they did that as a tie-in before Encounter at Farpoint premiered. And honestly, this for me, not that I'm saying the other Star Treks aren't my Trek, but this was the Trek I grew up on. This was the Trek that I was most exposed to. I have watched the TOS or anything, at least a good chunk of it. But for me, this was the Trek I grew up on as a young man going into and as a teenager. So I was absolutely on board with this. I very rarely ever missed an episode. I've watched it in syndication. I'm eventually going to get it on either DVD or Blu-ray, whichever I can get my hands on and everything. I'm assuming it's out on both. Because that's how much of a fan I am of this show, because this is good sci-fi. This is a great science fiction show and everything that does, in some ways or anything, because you do have episodes that do pay homage to the original series and everything with their titles and with the storylines and so on. But at the same time, this was a quantum leap. Sorry, no pun intended. In terms of storytelling in some instances, but also in terms of effects, because with the TOS movies, they had to do a little bit of jury rigging and everything, and they were having to figure things out. But with TOS, eventually the Enterprise you saw on screen was CGI. At least it was a pretty decent rendition of CGI. But the thing that I appreciated most about TNG was it didn't talk down to me. It talked to me. It posed moral and ethical questions and everything. And the episode I'll talk about tonight and everything is one of those great episodes and everything. It's from, I remember correctly, season 1 of TNG. So anyway, that's my thoughts initially on TNG. So I yield the floor to my other panelists.
All right, my guest panel is here. Jack Beers, your thoughts on TNG?
So 1987, I was in kindergarten in 1987. So I was
Okay.
very much
No
unaware
laughing,
of.
guys.
No, it's fine. But I was very much unaware of the hype behind it and all that. But I had seen the movies before, and so my first reaction was, "Where's Spock? Where's Kirk?" Because I didn't understand at first. But once I learned who Picard and Data and Worf was and all that, I started getting into it. And when I was a kid, I didn't understand what was going on. I just liked the ships going around and shooting every so often. And I liked Data, and I liked Worf. And so, as I got older, I actually, I watched it in kind of different stages of my life. I would binge it. And so when I got older, all of a sudden I started understanding, okay, this is, these guys are about a peaceful mission and blah, blah, blah. And I watched it again differently, and I'd be like, oh, what does that word mean? Let me look that up. Whatever, they'll say something like resting on your laurels, or Picard would be like, sophistry. And he'd be like, what's that mean? You have to look it up. And so I would do that. Or what's a neutrino? Every time they'll say neutrinos, but you don't know what a neutrino is. You start looking it up. And so I feel like TNG helped me get smarter. It kind of raised my intelligence or my self-awareness. And, the latest time I've done it, which was recently, I realized just how much how much of my life I kind of put into this franchise, because as a young adult, I started really idolizing Captain Picard, and I started really getting into I originally liked Worf. He was my favorite character as a child. When I was a little older, it became Data, because he was just so curious, and I was in that stage, and then eventually it turned to Picard, because as good as these two characters were, they were strengthened by his leadership. And so he became my favorite character, and I started studying him. And I actually kind of adopted some of his philosophy into my own life. The idea that you can be better than who you are today. You can always strive to become a better person. I love that stuff about him, and I adopted that into my life. So yeah, TNG means a lot to me. I didn't realize it until it didn't really hit me until I guess recently how much I love that show. Even though I had always watched it, I had always I just never realized how deep it was for me. Yeah.
No, and that's understandable. I mean, you haven't heard me on other things, but I've said I became an IT guy because of people like Scotty and Data. I mean, that's
Right.
the career path I choose. And I know a lot of people in the medical field and other fields who have, they grew up on it. I knew older people, younger people, TNG and TOS. They shaped the idea of someone wanting to do something because of what they saw. And they may not, of course, got to do what Bones did, or do a warp core engineer, but they became engineers. They became science. They followed a
Right.
passion because they saw it on a show. And this is why I say these are two shows that are not, in my mind, just TV shows. They've earned the status cultural phenomena. But before we go into episodes, I want to give Brian, I want to give you time. Tell us your thoughts on TNG.
Yeah, I'll try to just sum it up, because a lot of how I feel about the show has been said already. I was born in '83, so I didn't really experience Next Generation until it was over.
Same here.
Generations was my first real foray into that. It was an okay movie, but Deep Space Nine is really where I got in. But with Next Generation for me, it was like my friend coming home from school, because it was on syndication every day. And after I get home from school, when I was in between like 6th and 7th grade, that's what would be on TV, and I would watch every single episode. I remember I had the encyclopedia, and it only went up to the 5th season. So after the 5th season of Next Generation, I hand wrote in every single episode title and all that kind of stuff, just to keep up on the chronology, all the way to all good things. So I really love me some Next Generation. And yeah, I got the First Contact poster, so I really do love it. And then right up here, I've got, indulge a little bit here. This has got some
nice.
I went
Very
to
nice.
convention.
Very nice.
Marina Sirtis.
Oh, beautiful.
Geordi LaForge, Worf, and Data. So yeah, it was good times. I love me my Next Generation. So. But
now you see here, you know, when it comes to it, like I said, this is just a show that had all the ingredients to possibly fail, but managed to still strive and succeed, and has laid the groundwork for some of the greatest episodes. Even post, I'm not saying as great as TOS, but some of the greatest episodes. And you know, I mean, some of them, like one of my personal favorites that I'll talk about later. But I wanna start the floor out with a personal favorite, and I know he's chomping at the bit to talk about it, so I'm gonna hand it over. Ambassador is going to talk about the TNG episode Measure of a Man.
So, well, honestly, Jess, you could have let Jack go first, or even Brian and everything. You didn't have to let me go first, but I do appreciate it. Yeah, Measure of a Man obviously is a very, this is a Data and Picard centric. This focuses around those two characters. And the thing that I appreciate, one of the many things I appreciate about this episode is the fact that it is primarily a moral and ethical exploration of what it means to be sentient, what it means to be a free person. And I love the fact that they use Data as the mechanism, the tool and everything, the plot device to explore these questions. Because honestly, it's something that we don't question very often and everything in our lives. What does it mean to be sentient? What does it mean to be self-aware? What does it mean to be a free human being, to make a free being, to make choices and make to choose the course of one's own life? And of course, you have the scientist. Oh, for heaven's sakes, what was the name of the scientist? Oh, for heaven's
Maddox.
Yeah,
Maddox.
Bruce Maddox.
Bruce Maddox.
Thank you, Jess. I appreciate it. And
No
he obviously has a history with Data. He was one of the officers that helped reconstruct and help Data along the road to becoming a Starfleet officer, obviously. And now you've got Maddox coming back into Data's life, and he's like, I want to build more of them. But here's the thing, and I know this is kind of on the nose. Maddox, throughout the episode until towards the end, he always refers to Data not as a he or a other personal pronoun or anything, primarily he or him, but he refers to it as it. And I think the reason Maddox does that is due to the fact that he's trying to unperson Data, because all he sees is a compilation of servos and a positronic brain and artificial eyes and artificial everything, essentially, because obviously Data's an android. But there's a moment in the episode, and I know some people did not care for this character. I personally liked Guinan, and I liked the fact that she was the one that Picard had this conversation with and everything, because obviously Guinan is played by Whoopi Goldberg, who is a person of color and who has his personal history in real life when it comes to a race that was, one, owned as slaves, and two, discriminated against rather staunchly and unfairly, in my personal opinion, throughout the history of the United States and the world and everything up until a point. And she's like, isn't that, well, I know Picard echoes this comment, but she also echoes, she's like, a entire race of datas, all disposable and all easily constructed. And, you know, during the trial and everything, when they're trying to decide, is Data sentient or is he property? And, you know, the great thing about this episode, you've got Riker, who has to be the prosecuting party and everything, and he goes through the schematics of Data and figures out where his shutoff switch is, how to deconstruct him, and so on. And I'll say this and everything just as a side note, very briefly. That moment and everything where Riker disconnects Data's arm, not is it just a powerful moment, but it is also a very ingenious moment in terms of special effects, makeup, and prosthetics, and so on. And everything. That moment holds up even now in 2020. But, you know, Riker makes a comment, Pinocchio's strings are cut. And it's just absolutely devastating. But Picard, being Picard, he's able to make a good argument. And ultimately, we have the resolution where Data's like, I refuse to submit to your tests. But he's like, that, and this is something that's very amicable about Data. He says to Maddox, but continue your work. Some of your theories intrigue me. And he's like, when you are ready, I will be here. And he's like, I will happily help you. And of course, you do have, I think, at least one follow-up episode or two follow-up episodes where he's sending log entries to Maddox and everything just to kind of give him a better idea of what his day-to-day life on the Enterprise is.
Yeah, I think
yeah,
I'm
going to talk about Data's Day.
Yeah, and I won't
talk about Data's Day later.
Yeah, and I won't spoil any of that and everything. I'll leave that for you, Jess, and everything. But yeah, this was a very powerful episode because it does make you think, what does it mean to be sentient? What does it mean to be a person with free will? And the other part about this episode that I really appreciate is the fact that the judge advocate, the JAG officer there on the starbase and everything is a former acquaintance of Picard.
Yep. And,
you know, she's got some really good one-liners and everything. And one of them that's actually, she's talking about Data's property. He is a toaster. And it's amazing to me that in the 24th century, somebody knows what a toaster actually is and can make that reference. But yeah, you know, and I'll make this one other comment very briefly, and then I'll yield the floor. A follow-up episode, well, not so much a follow-up, but another data-centered episode that I also love and is The Offspring, where he builds another android.
Yep.
That is an episode that I absolutely love, and it kind of brings up that follow-up question. Is Lal Data's child, or is she property of the Federation? And ultimately, they rule that she is Data's child. But unfortunately, Lal malfunctions and ultimately has to be deactivated. And you have that zoom in on Data towards the end, and you can almost see maybe a moment of emotion in Data and everything when he's thinking about Lal. So anyway, I yield the floor. So.
And, you know, Ambassador, the reason why I went with you first is because you were going to bring up a strong emotional episode. And I wanted to give our guests, panelists, the first chance to respond. So, Jack, Brian, I yield the floor to you to discuss this episode before the rest of us do.
Yeah, Measure of a Man. It was one of those episodes in the first or second season?
First season, I'm pretty sure.
But yeah, I mean, with all the tumult that went on between or in the writing room and all that kind of stuff during those times, it was amazing. it was one of the ones that really anchored the series as far as how it was going to be approached on big moral questions, and that was definitely where it started. And they continued later on with Voyager and with the Doctor and stuff like that, with rights for holograms and stuff like that. So it kind of it set the stage for that the idea of progressing that direction as far as sentience for non-sentience.
I think the speech that Picard does in his argument in Measure of the Man is his finest speech. Definitely.
One of them.
Yeah, I like, just me personally, I think it's his best speech. He does such good speeches. I was always it was funny how like his speech would even motivate me. Like I would die for this guy, So it was so, like when Riker, when you were talking about Riker removing Data's arm, that was devastating because I was, because I was feeling like, how do you beat that argument? He just shut him off. How do you beat that argument? I don't know how you beat that argument. So what happens is Picard doesn't know how to beat that argument. He goes to 10 forward. He meets Guinan. Guinan gives him an argument, and in his Picard fashion, he completely understands how to shape this argument so that he's asking everybody, do you know what he is? Do you know what he is? I don't know, and it was such, I don't know, just, and the tension behind all of it just felt so, like Data's life or whatever was on the line, and Data didn't, Data himself didn't want to go through it. He had the conversation with Picard in his I think the ready room, and he tells him, hey, what if Maddox is successful or whatever, and Data counters his argument by saying, well, hey, isn't Geordi's visor more superior to human eyes? Why don't we require everyone to replace their eyes with visors? And Picard's like, oh, you know what I mean? So there's such moral, the search for the moral right in this show is so, I don't know, just powerful. Yeah, I believe that I believe that Measure of the Man is one of the, I don't know if it's the best. My favorite one I'll talk about later, but I think it is one of the best episodes. And the writers, I can't remember the lady's name, Snodgrass, I believe her name, the one who wrote the episode. She was in her, this was one of her first scripts.
Yeah, and I think, and Jack, I think you're about right. I think it was, I can't remember her first name, but yeah, I think it was
Melinda Snodgrass.
Yeah,
Melinda Snodgrass.
Yeah, I think.
Really?
Right.
And this was one of her first.
And she also wrote Offspring. And if you remember,
wow.
There's a little scene right before Lull malfunctions where they almost go Measure of a Man all over again. Picard's like, I will fight this, and and then of course it gets interrupted. But the reason why it felt so similar was because she also helped write that episode.
Well, one of the biggest things I'm going to say about the episode of Measure of Man is, as a young child, when I first saw it, which would have been about 8 or 9 years old, I didn't even understand why this was an issue. It was, and I'm not trying to get political, but I want to make a point. This was like literally my family was trying to explain to me that this was literally like a comparison to the gay straight community. And I said, well, what the hell is that? Or I didn't say that. I didn't say it like that, but I said, well, what is that? They said, well, that's boys like boys, girls like. I'm like, okay, what's the problem? I mean, I'm 70 years old. I'm trying to contemplate what's going on a TV show. I'm asking legitimate questions like, why is this a big deal? Why is this even a question? Why is he being questioned as a human? And then my parents are talking to me about sexuality, and I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm like, I am so like, I don't understand why this is a problem. And they're trying to explain it to me. And in my mind, I'm like, I wanted to literally tell my parents, are y'all like stupid? I mean, I love my parents, and my parents are good people, and we're close, but they were trying to explain it in my young mind, what they were trying to explain to me, and I don't remember what they said to me. I just remember they were trying to in the 80s, trying to explain that to me in that fashion, and I just couldn't get it because they're like, well, people don't like this. I'm like, okay, why? Well, people don't like people because they're color. I'm like, color or what? I mean, I wasn't raised on any concept of bigotry, so I couldn't comprehend what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I mean, at
Great
that point,
dude.
for me, it's like I had a very, very similar experience where my dad was trying to explain it to me. I'm like, can I just have some ice cream? You know, we're on two different planets here. But really, I mean, this episode for me was very important because it asked that question. It was like, is Data more than the sum of his parts? And I'm like, and you know, luckily to come up with the answer was yes. He is his own individual, unique life form, and it's actually kind of similar to like the TOS episode, like Devil in the Dark. You know, the one with the silicon-based life form, where people just aren't. You know, they're not sorry, my brain's farting again. You know, they're not looking for silicon-based life. They're looking for carbon-based life. And it isn't until they actually set their sensors to look for a silicon-based life form that they go realize, like, oh my god, this planet is just littered, for lack of better words, with tons of the silicon-based life forms. But then on, you know, over here is like, is Data a life form we have never seen before? And you know, I do believe the judge made the right decision. You know, but again, that argument with Riker was so damn compelling. You know, I'm sitting there thinking when I was a kid, like, yeah, I was like, yeah, Picard's not going to pull this off. But at the same time, you know that he is because there's only like 20 minutes left in the episode.
Yeah, but think about this. At the end of the episode, Data asks Riker to come over, and he's like, Data, I almost won. He goes, yes.
Yes.
And, you know, he's like, and he hated it when he when he thought he proved his point. He took his hand and put it over his face. He's like, and he hated himself. You could see like there's that moment like. Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, you're right. There's a scene where Riker is looking through his, computer. Give me everything about Data and his schematics and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And he starts looking. And I'm gonna assume he found the off switch because his eyes light up for a second. He's like, "Oh, yes."
He does that slap
and then
thing.
he realizes,
he does that slap thing.
Oh no. Because he realizes that he's going to have to use this argument, and it killed him to do that. It hurt him because that was his friend.
Also, he didn't believe what he was trying to do, but he had to do his job. Now, yes. I mean, that is actually something that is never touched on. He had a legal obligation. He had two choices. He could say yes and do it, which he had to. He said no because he didn't believe it, and then she tried to make a summary judgment. He had one other option that was never said. He could have resigned. but it was never put in front of him. But still, the way Data said it at the end, your pain paved the way. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the
Right.
exact wording, but it was like your discomfort or your pain actually paved the way for my freedom. It was something
He
like
was
that. I don't
grateful.
remember. Yeah, he was grateful because it was like because he did so good at his job, he actually, I mean, for lack of a better term, because it gave Picard the chance to counter the question. He right a compelling argument together that the only thing to do was question the author.
He did lock up, right?
Down sideways.
He's breaking up on me.
Yeah, me too.
Up there, bud.
I am.
Yeah,
I'm breaking up.
you're better now.
I'm breaking up.
Yeah, you're okay now.
Oh, okay. Oh, anyway, I'm sorry. Well, I don't know what that was. I was gonna say let's. I think we've kind of hit this one up all around. I want to give one of my guests a chance to talk about the show. So, Jack, if you don't mind, I'm gonna give Brian the floor for a minute. Let him introduce himself. By the way, if you guys weren't told, I have a policy. If you have a channel to plug, you are required to plug it.
All right, no problem. I'm Brian Hill, Master of None. That's the name of my channel as well. Today, I'm going to come on and talk about Time's Arrow, parts 1 and 2.
Ooh.
Nice, very nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's one of my favorite episodes of the whole series. It takes place between the season finale of season 5 and the season premiere of season 6. Basically, we'll get started. It starts off where they're on Earth, and they're at the Presidio going through a mining site, and they find Data's head severed underground. And they take it back to the Enterprise and realize that it's been there for about 400 or 500 years. Basically, they end up finding, triolic waves and stuff like that, and it takes them to Davidia 2, where they go and find, excuse me, they go and find the Davidians, which are a group of people who are basically out of phase with us, so we can't really see them when they're in their element, because they're just off by nanoseconds and years, just because of their energy and stuff like that. And it turns out that they're feeding off of people, their essences and stuff like that, going back in time. So basically Data accidentally goes back into time, and when he gets there, he runs into an old 49er, a miner teaching him how to beg and stuff like that, and he runs into a bellhop who's Jack London, who later became a writer of Call of the Wild and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool that they added, that
stuff like that, Call of the Wild.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Not only that, and Brian, I don't want to steal your thunder, but you also have another famous writer and everything in this episode.
I'm gonna get there.
Okay.
But so Jack London being in there, being the bellhop, takes him to this poker game, and at the poker game, one of the actors that's playing in there is Mark Alamo, who is Gul Dukat. And it's really interesting just to see him, without the makeup on and stuff like that. He's got the mean sideburns and stuff that he had in other Cardassians, but it was nice to see somebody that's normally an alien character playing a character that's,
Well, you got to remember too, he played the first Romulan, one of the first Romulans we saw in TNG,
and the first Cardassian too. He was one of the first.
Yes, he was.
One of the
guys just everywhere.
Yeah, right.
All the races have their own Gul Dukat, okay?
But no, Gul Dukat.
Jeffrey, I'm sorry, but Jeffrey Combs, I just saw him show up on Voyager at the same time as the guy who played Martog, Jay.
J.G.
Hertzler,
Herlitzer.
yeah.
Yeah, I watched that episode where they were both in there, and I tell you what, I would have recognized him even if they hadn't told me there because just of his voice. He just have that voice.
Very
Oh my
unique.
god! We'll get to there another time. Please continue.
But anyways, Data's stuck back in time, and the crew is back in the 24th century. Guinan approaches Picard and tells him that he needs to go on this mission, and that the reason why is discovered shortly thereafter because Data ends up going to this party where he finds out that Guinan is there. But we all know that Guinan is long-lived, so she was actually alive during that time and on Earth during that time. Then we run into Samuel Clemens, i.e. Mark Twain. So I like the literary references on that one, and it gets a little bit better, especially when things go wrong and Samuel Clemens ends up getting sent back to the future, where he gets to get explained what the future's like by Troy, where she basically tells him that, you're a dinosaur, old man. Everything that you did back in the day, we don't have anymore. We don't have the hunger and the poor and all that kind of stuff. And just a side topic, as somebody that's kind of been pro Picard, it kind of took a shot at that defense for me for a little bit because it reminded me of why I like The Next Generation with the positivity and all that kind of stuff, because when you take a character out of their element from the past and put them into the future element, they really get to see all that goodness that the future had to offer, a future that was fun to live in, you know what I mean, or would have been fun to live in.
Yeah.
But so anyways, I mean, basically to sum it up, in continuation, Picard goes back in time and he actually meets Guinan for her first time, which is kind of a nice little dichotomy of how one meets one person in the future and then knows from the past kind of thing. And I'm wondering what it was like knowing Picard for the first almost 6 seasons of the show and not bringing up the fact that you met him in the 1800s. That must have been hard. But long story short, it was really good. I totally enjoyed it. I took a ton of notes, but I didn't think I would actually need all of it. It was really fun watching that episode again this morning. It's been a while. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. And I kind of wanted to do a Western theme one because we talked about it the other day on the Back to the Future stream. It was either that or Fistful of Data. I like that one too.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's basically what I got to say about that one. I'm pretty sure most of us are, like that episode as well. It's anytime you got a cliffhanger and you got Majel Barrett's voice in between saying "Last time on Star Trek: The Next Generation," makes it happen, guys.
Oh yes.
Well, I would have to say that for an episode like that, a two-parter, they really did a good job trying to blend the timelines together. And, I don't know who the actor was who played Samuel Clemens / Mark Twain, but man, I love that guy. I thought he was so much fun to listen to.
He was hilarious.
He was such a stubborn ass, man. It was great.
I like the part where he came in the closet.
I know, he was so much. He was just so much fun, but he never came off as a bad guy. He was just his curiosity, his exploration, his books, his literal understanding. He was all about trying to experience things. And he was the kind of person who was like, oh, I was wrong. Oh, okay. See, he wouldn't be like, no, I am this way and this is the truth. When he's faced with, oh, I was wrong about things. Oh, okay, that's great. Yeah. He actually enjoyed the fact that he was wrong and that, he got a chance to say, oh, wow, no one will
Yeah.
believe me, but no one will believe me. I can't tell him, but I could write a little bit here and there and just plant a little nugget because I know the future is going to be good. I mean, and he has no idea of the World War One, Two, Three, eugenics wars, Zindi War, the Earth Romulan War,
The Borg.
but I mean, the Borg, Wolf 359. But the point is, he sees things that, as far as he's concerned, is what he was writing about. And it's like, he's like, my science fiction. I mean, what greater compliment could a science fiction writer be than find out that your science fiction in some ways is going to become science fact
Yep.
and history?
And,
You can't.
Go ahead, Jess.
No, go ahead. No. You go ahead. I was done.
Just very briefly, the actor who played Mark Twain actually played also a character named Radu and everything on TNG when the episode was called When the Bow Breaks. And his name is Jerry Hardin. And as Google says, he's 90 years old.
Yeah. Not only that, I mean, I loved that Twain character too. Where just to compliment off of what Jesse was saying, was that he didn't have, he couldn't be told that he was wrong. He had to be shown that he was wrong. And some of it, ended up kind of like badly or was misopportune for somebody for the cast and crew. And then some of it was just outright hilarious. You could tell he was just such. I don't know. It was like intoxicating to be around him. You just wanted to soak in, like all the. Here he is, this guy who is famous in his own right. Hanging out in these parties, and he's just drawing these crowds because of his magnetic personality. But then he just hears, someone says, "Oh, a starship." And then that curiosity just gets a hold of him, and he can't take no for an answer. He can't be like, "You just threw this in my face. I can't deny this now." So of course he follows them, he tracks them, and all of a sudden, he gets proven, everything that he possibly could have possibly imagined was actually true. These people are from the future. They are in outer space. They are traveling amongst the stars, and again, just like what Jesse said, when he went into the future to see the Enterprise, like all of a sudden it's like, you know what? Wow, humanity comes this far in the future, everything's gonna be all right. And after that, he comes back. Then he comes back and with the cane and tells Picard how to get home. Again, it was just once he realized that the future was going to be okay and his curiosity was satisfied, then he went from like a quasi antagonist to a protagonist. He was, again, it was just such a great episode. But my favorite part of this episode, hands down, is that meeting between Picard and Guinan right before Picard goes into the past. When Guinan is making that little party thing. And, she just sprinkles a little something in there, and next thing the whole thing just vaporizes. I don't know what it is. I just love that particular scene.
Yeah. Shows off that bartender.
Well, I've got to say this, and like I said, anybody who's been on my Twitter or anything knows my political views. So,
no, we don't.
But I don't want to go there. But I want to. So that being said, I always want to make sure that being said. At that time in my life, Whoopi Goldberg was really a great, soft, sensual, friendly voice for a lot of people, and she had this program. It was her own talk show. I think it was like her first talk show. I don't remember when, but it was called Whoopi Plus One. and it was the whole point was it was her and one other guest, and it was such a nice, comfortable, sensual mood. It really set a tone for me, and it was like she took her persona from Guinan on that. So I mean, it was just a nice factor there. And I mean, she really took that character and did an amazing job. I mean, I don't know how many episodes she was in, but man, every time she was in there, she did. Like her or not, for whatever views, she, I think, gave her entire performance to that role, and I will never
Love
give
that
her
character.
shit for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Guinan was awesome.
She's supposed to be back in season 2 of Picard.
That's what I heard.
Brian, no, guys, no.
Yeah, let's not.
Not this. We're not going there.
All right, sorry.
We're not going there. That's the the rule.
Now you
That's
have to
a
put
pork spar thing.
now you have to put $1 in the
All
jar.
right, hey, all right. All right, so Jack Beers. So Jack Beers,
Yes.
your episode. What did you think? Your episode. What
so
do you
my
wanna
episode.
discuss?
So I mean, like,
Yeah.
I have a lot of episodes I really want to discuss. Before I do, can I touch on a different episode real quick? Is anyone gonna do Best of Both Worlds?
No.
Hey,
Okay.
listen, we'll do more episodes in the future. This is
Okay.
not, we have to cover them all.
Right.
I know Best of Both Worlds is kind of a given, but if you want to talk about it, that's fine. But no, I don't think anybody had that one on their plate tonight.
No.
I think
just
maybe because we all thought that was too much of a given.
I just wanted to touch on that because a lot of so real quick, the idea that Picard is privileged, I think that just Best of Both Worlds completely blows that argument away. That's all I really want to say about it. There was an article. But otherwise, what I really wanted to talk about was The Inner Light, because it's my favorite episode.
Oh my God. I'm muting. I'm not saying shit until you're done now.
A real good one.
Hey, forever
Okay.
quiet.
So it was okay. So I was when I was looking for my favorite. Of course, as I said, as I got older, I got more into all of the Picard episodes, and so I got more into like his personal episodes as well. I really love Family because you don't really see him deal with his encounter until Family, and so I mean it was the next episode, but they show you that hey, like it wasn't just a one and done thing. Like he actually suffered from this, and I always appreciated that. Another thing that Picard always suffered from was his duties always prevented him from starting a family, really, or really getting into deep relationships with other people. When you watch the very first episode of Picard, or not Picard, no, of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where he first meets Riker. Now, how close of a relationship does Picard and Riker end up having? They have a very close relationship. But this very first encounter, he's trying to put on this leadership image to Riker. So he's not even looking at him in some scenes. He makes him dock with the saucer section without without automatic control. He made him do it manually. He kind of tested him a little bit, and then eventually he began trusting him, and they became, of course, they became very close. So with Inner Light, it starts with they're out at a solar system, and they're scanning the solar system or whatever, and they find a probe. And the probe sends like an energy beam of some sort straight to Picard. Well, I guess it scans the ship first, and then it sends it to Picard. And Picard collapses. He looks like he's, maybe having a seizure or something. What's actually happening is this beam or whatever is projecting this whole lifetime of memories into his body, I guess, within a 20-minute period. And so it starts off, Picard wakes up, and he's, freaking out a little bit, like, why are you keeping me here? It's, the woman's like, relax, I'm your wife. This is, this place is called Catan. You're not, you haven't been well. You've been sick lately. And Picard's like, BS. I got, I'm a captain. My starship is somewhere around here. And for years afterwards, he searches for the Enterprise. He builds a telescope, or he buys one or something, and he's looking in the stars for it. And his wife is always worried about him, because ever since he got sick, he's been looking for this, he's had this whole strange world in his head or whatever. And so eventually Picard decides to stop fighting it. He finally relents. Relents. Yes. I think it takes him years, but he finally relents, and he gives in to his wife. He just decides, let's just settle down and be happy. And, what I love about this episode is that as I said before, he never got the chance to start a family. The closest family he had was Renee and Robert at the vineyard. And you see them only, sadly, he only sees them once. And they have some correspondence, and then sadly, by generations, there's a fire and they pass away. By the way, I thought that was a pretty good emotional scene when Picard portrayed that. But back to Inner Light, he finally gives in to her, and they raise a family, and they raise a family, and the family is as intelligent as you would expect, coming from, with Jean-Luc Picard being the father. The daughter's into astronomy. Astronomy, and the son, he goes back and forth.
Music.
But
he was a musician.
Yeah, he wanted to be a musician.
Yeah. Remember, he had all those other passions, but music.
Yeah, he went back and forth, but eventually he got into music. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they and then eventually, I believe he had one grandchild. He had a grandchild. So he successfully raised these children to adulthood. That's 18, 20 years of commitment that he spent afterwards. I guess just giving up on the whole Enterprise idea and just deciding to settle down and thinking that this was going to be his life from here on out. And then eventually, the environment starts to have issues, and they realize that I can't remember exactly. I think the sun was exploding or something like that.
Getting too close to the sun, and they were getting too hot.
They were getting too hot. Okay, yeah, the close to the sun, they were getting too hot. So they were going to be destroyed. And I guess they realized this. So instead of trying to save themselves and whatnot, they created this, reality for someone to live through. they put it in this probe and they sent it off. And that's the last thing Picard sees before, his dead friends and relatives start coming back. And then he eventually wakes up back on the Enterprise with only, I believe, I can't remember exactly, 20 minutes passing by?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Now, look at this. Let's think about this. These people were about to be extinct. They didn't want to be forgotten. They're desperate. This is what they came up with.
Yep.
Yes.
They had no idea what that interlink would do. I mean, they had no idea if it would work or not. I mean, for all it could have happened, they could have hit the wrong person. It could have killed them. Or it could have hit the wrong person and it could have fried their brain. I mean, anything. They didn't know. All they knew was this was their one chance to let people know they lived.
Yep.
That there was something there, that there was a history.
This was their time capsule.
Right.
Yes.
One of the things I loved about it was the idea that they established in the beginning of the episode that Picard doesn't know how to play anything. He sucked at playing the flute. And then in the end of that lifetime, he was an expert on the flute, at least on that Resican flute. And then when he came back, and then Riker, walked in with the box, didn't say anything, just walked out. And then Picard opened it and he was like, oh, and he took what I loved was he took that, he was the only thing that was left from that lifetime. It was the only thing that was left from that lifetime. And he picked it up and he hugged it.
Yep.
And then he played it. And he was able to play it. And he played that beautiful song that they play. It was such a beautiful song. I think eventually they turned it into into one of the soundtrack themes or something like that for one of the anniversaries. But
yeah,
it was such a good song.
But you could also see, at the end when
that is one of the biggest that I think they did wrong. And I'm sorry, I'm going to critique this one. The whole thing with that little flute came up only one at a time after this. But it had so much potential to have been.
There was
so
a second.
Much more
there was a potential second, but it was a deleted scene in Nemesis. After the wedding, Data and Picard have a conversation, and I think it's Data. He actually, sees the box and opens it up and sees the flute in there, but they deleted it.
Yeah. So but it's like a really big thing for me that kind of made this this episode stand out is that, again, that very ending when he opens up that box and he sees that flute, you can actually see Picard having an emotional moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very very rare for Star Trek in general. He is very compassionate, but you really don't see the emotion really come out of him. It's like. And then he opens that box. It's like, oh my god! It's like, I know this. I know how to play this. I know exactly what this was. What this meant. It was just really cool to see how Patrick Stewart actually responded to it when he actually opened it up. And one of the little bits of trivia on this particular episode is that I believe it was Patrick Stewart's son that was playing one of his children in this episode.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
I did want to make fun of one little scene. There's a scene later on, actually in a different episode, where he gets a girlfriend, and they're playing. She's playing a keyboard, and he's playing the flute. But you can tell it's like two different arms, not his own arms, playing the flute.
Yeah, that.
I always thought it was hilarious.
He's got his arms behind his back, and some other dude's playing.
Yes, it's hilarious. I love it.
Okay, I have. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I missed it completely. All right, Myrr, you are up.
Oh boy. All right. So my episode is also, it has a subplot of it. It's also a bit data centric, and that is an episode called Peak Performance, season 2, episode 21. This is an episode where a what's the name of their thing? He was a Zach Dorn by the name of Seema Kohlrami. Comes aboard, and he is basically the Zach Dorn are a bunch of strategy experts, and they're going to go and fight an old Constellation class called the Hathaway, and Picard and Riker are going to duke it out in a battle simulation. So, was it Picard? Riker has the option to pick any number of crew that he wants, with the exception of Data. Data was going to be Picard's first officer. So one of the most hilarious things I have ever seen in Star Trek happens in this episode, where you see Worf. He's building a ship, like a matchstick boat. And as soon as Riker rings his quarters, he breaks one of the pieces off, and you just see the frustration in his face. And he's like, "Oh, did I interrupt you, Mr. Worf?" Worf goes and looks down at the matchstick, just takes it, throw it all away, and says, "Just finished." And so, so they go aboard. Also, was it Geordi goes aboard, and Wesley is picked to go aboard. And so this episode stuck out for me because I don't know, maybe this is like just the engineer side of me, but I love when they have a ship that's broken and then they work at fixing it. Because they have 48 hours to put the ship into shape so they can begin this thing. So somewhere along the way, they go to they're all aboard on the Hathaway. They start taking inventory, like what's working, what's not, what do you have? And they go into engineering. They only have a few dilithium fragments, and there's no antimatter, so there's no warp drive. So Wesley comes up with this idea that he's has an experiment that he has running on the Enterprise. And so he goes back over to the Enterprise, gets it, and now they have a very small quantity of antimatter that's going to give them a 2-second warp jump at warp 1. And then basically they're going to blow out all their systems. And they're going to basically lose. So Worf comes and gets up with a suggestion of using some of the Enterprise's to hack one of the systems to bring up an alien, a Romulan warbird, to come into this, have it pretend that they're that the system, it's like basically hacking the Enterprise system, so it'll appear like a Romulan warbird is flying by. And when the battle begins, they do that, and of course Picard, he freaks out, tries to switch everything over, and then almost the Hathaway gets 7 major hits onto the Enterprise as they're flying through. Then a Ferengi ship shows up on their screen, and Picard is thinking that this is, oh my God, Worf knows how. They changed the code for Worf, so they can't do it again. But Picard's like, "Oh, Mr. Worf, why was he able to hack the system?" So they ignore that, and they come after. It's actually a real Ferengi warbird, or whatever class that they have there. It's a real Ferengi ship, and so they basically do some maneuvers. They activate. Picard sends photon torpedoes going to hit the Hathaway. The Hathaway initiates its warp jump, and kind of freaks out the Ferengi, saying, "Oh yeah, my hearts, we have no idea that the Federation had such iron." And then they take off. And that was basically the end of the episode. Now there is a subplot to this where Data through Mrs. McCoy, as I call Dr. Pulaski, Mrs. McCoy goes. Mrs. McCoy goes and asks Data to challenge this Mr. Kohlrami to a game of Stratagema. Now, this is something. He is a 3rd level Grand Master. I'm not sure what that means in KKK terms, but I'm assuming it's pretty high. So, Data starts playing, plays against him and ends up losing. And one of the big subplots on this was Data is now trying to find out, hey, I should have won against a person. I'm malfunctioning in some way. So he goes and does so he's checking in, turnaround diagnostics, trying to find out what's wrong. And, Troy comes to visit. It didn't help. Mrs. McCoy comes to visit. That doesn't help. And then finally Picard gets up there. It's like, I'm not having this shit anymore. I need you. You're my first officer. Get up on the bridge. And then the moral of the story of this whole thing comes out. It says, Data, it is possible to do everything right and still lose.
Yes.
And at that point, Data's like, oh, I never thought of that. And then all of a sudden he becomes, he's just, he realizes, okay, well then I'm not malfunctioning. And then performed an excellent job as a first officer. But then at the very, very end, he challenges Kohlrami again to a rematch. And at that point, he changes his strategy. Instead of winning, he puts himself into a perpetual stalemate. And just like giving up obvious points of advancement so that he can play a more defensive game. And it pissed off Kohlrami so badly, he ends up quitting the game. And Data says right at the end, I busted him up.
Yes.
And so, what was interesting to me, now I don't know if you guys know who Kohlrami hit. Kohlrami was played by a guy named Roy Brocksmith. He was also the doctor in Total Recall.
Yep.
He was the guy who was telling Schwarzenegger that he was going to be lobotomized. So anyway, that's what I got on this one. Again, this was my favorite episode of pretty much of the entire series.
And Mary, you've got a little bit of shade thrown at you and everything in the chat and everything. Apostle Parv Tarsus says, "Don't give Pulaski credit by comparing her to McCoy."
That's Mrs. McCoy.
No, it's Dr. Catherine Pulaski.
It's Mr. McCoy.
Dr. Catherine Pulaski.
Look, I'm sorry, but that's kind of what they threw in on season 2. They wanted as close of a doctor to McCoy as possible. It just didn't work out in season 2. That's why we never saw her again after that.
You gotta get behind the scenes, man.
That Myrr, really.
If you knew the behind the scenes of that whole thing, there's more to the story than just that.
On the bridge.
But anyway, I want to get to my episode, Data's Day. Now, I picked this episode because it actually has 2 factors that really relate to me. One, Chief O'Brien is one of my favorite characters because he is what did you just say?
I said he's overrated.
What? For shame.
They could have also called it O'Brien's Day.
Oh,
pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
He's I'm sorry. He's underrated. I love Cole Meany as an actor to begin with. He is just so underrated.
I'm teasing.
I'm gonna mute
I'll be
you
honest,
all if you don't shut up.
I love Chief O'Brien.
You don't have to.
No. No. Everybody's fine. No. Jeez, where was I going with this? Y'all kind of screwed me up.
Hold on.
Data's Day.
One second, Jesse. Responding to Jeff B, I do like Dr. Pulaski, but she just reminded me so much of McCoy. for not wanting to take transporters and that kind of thing. I still just call her Mrs. McCoy.
She is not McCoy.
No,
McCoy
she is not.
McCoy.
She is Mrs. McCoy, and I am
she's
paying
not
her.
Mrs. McCoy because Bones never
All
married.
right. Hey.
I am
You
paying her
two
respect.
You two can. Hey. I swear to God, you two can figure that one on your off time, not on my time. Sorry, folks.
I am with Apostle on that one. She was pretty much useless.
Stop. I don't want to go there anymore. Stop. We're not talking about that anymore.
Ambassador.
God, I'm gonna have to. Ambassador, no. We're done with this.
I love you. Always have.
All right.
Okay, go on.
All right. So Data's Day was one of honestly, it is always been one of my favorite episodes because literally it looks so mundane, but when you are my age now at 40 and you realize that this guy is only 29 years old and his whole life has been all he remembers is the time he was activated, the time he joined Starfleet. We don't know that. We know the difference between when he was activated in Starfleet, but I know he was about 27 years of service, and he still had a hard time grasping things. So it makes me wonder if this real, genuine assignment in the idea of humanity was the Enterprise. Because he was in the pilot doing these smiles that were like deviant, evil, and I was like, okay, dude, stop trying to fake the smile. I mean, I know it was the pilot and everything, but when you really look at it, he's trying something new because new crew. And then when you get to, which is many, many years later, and he had him spot, and he's helping with O'Brien and Keiko, and he doesn't even still have to. Good news, your say has decided to increase her happiness by breaking off the wedding. I mean, and then Data, even though all his processing capabilities isn't able to compute that. And then when Geordi says, next time I'll deliver the good news, it was like one of those moments where, I'm like, I want to almost grab Geordi and be like, do you realize he doesn't realize he screwed up? I mean, I know Geordi was his best friend, but times I have to be honest, sometimes I think Geordi forgot that aspect of their friendship. It was there, but sometimes the writers really jacked it up. And I mean, that's just it. So, as they're going through it, Data's trying, Data and him became very close. Why? Why does it matter? I mean, honestly, it was never given. But I mean, he, when Data is like confused on what happened, he goes and talks to Jordan. He's like, what did what did I do wrong? He understands that despite all the data he can process, he has no idea what he did wrong. And when his best friend makes that sarcastic comment, Data comes and sees him, and he's like, oh, which was, you know, when you think about watching that episode, you know, you can realize this android, for all his technical expertise, realizes he has flaws, limitations. He may not have emotion, but so what? Vulcans don't have emotion. Well, they suppress their emotion, but the point is, you know, which is an episode with Spock and him where they both make interesting compliments to each other or sarcastic remarks. But I mean, you know, he just that episode just for its, you know, for a 27-year-old or 29-year-old person at the time, but really having a childhood and never really having a central family figure, just kind of having to, I mean, literally wing it. I can understand why he would be so still kind of oblivious. And it still made for a great episode. And that's why I love it.
Well, and I'll chime in here very quickly. This, yeah, honestly, Data's Day is a great episode. You know, the interesting thing is, of all the episodes that we could have picked tonight, 3 out of 4 of us or so, and everything, I forget the ratio off the top of my head, we picked episodes that involve Data. Now, to really think about that for a minute, because Data, in a lot of ways, some people have said is somewhat more bland and annoying as a character. But the truth is, he very much was a focal point for the series because of the simple fact that this is our first time meeting a artificial life form and everything, a android. Because if you think about it, most of the artificial human beings that we have met and everything are androids or robots that we met in science fiction, except for maybe Ash and Bishop in the Alien movies, have been kind of one note. And what we get with TNG is a dissection and an exploration of what a artificial entity would be like in a possible future. Because here's the thing, we are making advancements in robotics. We are making advancements in artificial intelligence technology. So we are on the road to building Data. I mean, really think about it. And there's another TV series that does discuss this as well, and that is Battlestar Galactica, the reboot version, talks about how organic and inorganic life interplays with one another. And between the 5 of us, we picked episodes that very much hit upon the morality tale of what it means to interact with artificial life and treat it like a normal human being. And that is one of the great things about TNG, is the fact that you have all these different characters, both regular and guest starring, on the television on TNG, who have to interact with Data on a daily basis. And he is so inquisitive and so childlike in some instances, but at the same time, he is always growing and evolving and changing. And you know, one of the 2-parters that really delves deep into the whole personality of Data is the one where you bring in Lore, you bring in the Borg, and Lore is manipulating Data because Lore still has the second personality chip that yeah, I think that's the right one, Jack. Yeah, thank you. Descent and everything. That Noonien Soong and everything had created for Data to give him personality. And
Yeah, but remember at the end of that, I'm sorry, Ambassador, but remember at the end of that, one of the things was when Data was like, I was brainwashed. I was manipulated. And Data didn't even have to say these things. I comprehend them during my life in the military and, my life in general, where I understand that, he's like, he was literally tortured, manipulated, brainwashed. And he's like, if that's what emotions will do to me, why would I want it? And I
He got
mean,
real scared.
yeah, I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, the idea of, let's remember there is a fine line. The ambassador, I don't think it's brought up here, but let's think about this. It's like when don't always belay what you wish for. Data got what he would.
Be careful
Yeah,
what you
be
wish
careful
for.
what
You
you wish
just
for.
might
Just
get
might get it. And Data got a little bit of that, and Data didn't know how to deal with it. And you can't blame Data, but even though Data had lost all the emotions, he still, in some way, shape, or in somewhere in that circuitry at the end of that episode, he felt guilt and regret about what he did to Geordi. And that's why he
The
didn't want to
look on
put
his
that.
face.
Yes.
And not only that, the fact that he had to make the hard decision and deactivate Lore. This was his only family, except for the other female android that Sung had built and transferred the woman's consciousness into that positronic brain.
His wife.
Sung's wife.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, Thanks for that, because now I'm going to transition to that one. That is actually another actual beautiful episode of what Star Trek could do. She didn't have a clue she was an android, and even when Data found the holographic matrix that said whoever you are, and he goes, Data, I hoped you'd find her. He even programmed it. He was counting on it, but he was like, talk about love. You want to talk about love? Let's talk about love here. This man loved the woman so much he downloaded her matrix, and she left him. And you know what? He let her go. He let her go. If that ain't love, if that doesn't tell you what true love is, I don't know what is.
As a guy who's been divorced?
Yeah. That was just one episode where it was like, I programmed her to terminate after a long, wonderful life. But, he didn't say he fixed the point. He just might have said a random. She was the literal perfection. For lack of a Borg term, she was the perfection. She was everything he could have ever achieved. She was the monument of artificial life. She was true artificial perfection. And they gave Data the choice. Are you going to tell her the truth? And you know what? And you know what I love? I always say this because, I live in a crazy world. The truth is a little subjective. Data told her the truth.
Yeah, he
in
did.
his own way.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful episode. It changed nothing for her, he's like, you were injured, and told her Soon loved you, or I think he made the comment, but he told the truth. But the truth is always subjective.
Yeah.
At least.
And yeah, and just very quickly to the chat, Paul, Apostle Paul, I actually did discuss everything. You'll have to catch this on the replay and everything. I did discuss Offspring as an episode of mine that I very much appreciated because,
Yeah.
the fact that Data creates another android much like himself, except it looks more human than it does artificial. And it does. He is Lol's father, and he takes a very parental, a very protective role over her and everything because she is very foreign to the rest of the crew and everything. Because yes, she does have very much a childlike mentality, but at the same time, she's got a computing capacity and a learning capacity that rivals anything of a normal child and everything, or normal human child. And he's trying to walk her through the process of becoming sentient. And then there's that leap, again, no pun intended, that quantum leap when she develops emotion. And she is terrified, and she's scared, and she goes back to the quarters. And then you have that Starfleet admiral that comes on board and everything that's going to take custody of her. And he's like, after the fact or anything, he's like, his hands were moving faster than I can see, trying to stay ahead of the breakdowns. But he's like, it just wasn't meant to be. And, even up until that point, that particular Starfleet officer, which, fun fact, I think the actor had played a role on Days of Our Lives way back in the day. And he was like very sympathetic in that moment to Data and how Data was feeling, because obviously this admiral does have children and a family of his own. But at the same time, he's able to empathize with Data, and he's like, I relent. I won't push it any further, because he realizes obviously his actions were part of the consequences for Lol's breakdown, unfortunately.
Right.
So
I
This
find it very
is,
interesting.
Can I say something real quick? Hold on, Myrr. Just something here. That kind of an episode holds a heavy weight on someone like me because I've been through a terrible marriage and lost my child and had to fight to get her back. And when I think about an episode like that and the way that admiral describes his hands, that's literally what I was trying to do to get my child back. And it I didn't even really give it that kind of thought the last time I saw it live, which was only about 6 months ago. And the ambassador kind of brings up, just a touching point that just really hits home for someone like me, where it's like, those moments like that, they're hard to deal with sometimes. It's a crazy thing, but it was like, I came so close to having my child taken away from me by another entity, somebody else, a third party. They came and said, you know what, you're not a parent, this is not your daughter. And it was a battle from hell. So yeah, that kind of thing there. I was, I think the last time I watched Star Trek, I think I skipped that. I think I skipped Well. Actually, I know I did because I saw it before the crawl and I started bawling and I said, I can't watch this. This is too close to home for me. So yeah, I mean, sorry guys, I don't mean to get depressing on you. But things like that, they hold a deep meaning for a lot of people, and sometimes I think, people forget that this is why I said TNG, TOS, Star Trek. It's a cultural phenomenon. It hits tones that I don't even think it realized it meant to hit.
Hey, Jesse, do
And
you mind if I interrupt you real quick?
absolutely, go right ahead. I'll mute my
I-
ass right now.
I'm real sorry. The only reason why I'm kind of like I have something to say about that is because I too am divorced, and I too have children, and I really hate bringing this up because I've had my children doxxed, but you know, my oldest daughter came out to me as gay. She lives in West Virginia. I live in San Diego. And she came out to me as gay. If you know West Virginia, if you've been to that area, it's
I
very
lived in Wheaton.
Yeah, I live right next door.
I lived in
so.
Wheaton, West Virginia. We know the area. I
Yeah,
live in South Carolina, buddy.
she doesn't have a lot of support where she's at. Just to say the least. And so she confides in me. And of course, I don't mind. I mean, that's her life. That's not my life. Whatever she wants to do, whatever makes her happy, so be it. Now, I say that, also like because when she came up to me about it, I've said before I've taken Picard's philosophy to heart. And so what I want to do is I want to hear her out. I want to hear what she feels, why she feels that way, and whatever obstacles she's feeling. And I just want to help her go through it. And that's kind of how I felt.
All right, hey Jack, get with me offline.
Yes.
And I'll tell you this right now. My daughter is about to be 20. And I'll tell you right now, and I'm going to say this, and I say this with all the love in the world because it was the funniest thing. My daughter introduced me to her boyfriend on TV once on video feed, and I talked to him for a few minutes, and she comes back and she goes, "Well, what do you think, Dad?" I said, "Well, I'm shocked." She goes, "Why?" I said, "Well, he ain't a black man and he ain't a white woman." And then my daughter literally started laughing her ass off, saying, "Oh my God, Dad, you know me so well." I said, "Hey, I'm just saying." So hey,
I love when family is able to like connect like that.
but
And that's one of the things I love about my kid. We were able to
and
connect. I
that's
loved
one
it.
of the things about Star Trek. Star Trek is a connective tissue. It's all about it.
100%.
I mean, it is all positivity. I mean, remember, the whole point of the Federation was we had grown past our bigotries and stuff. It was always the other people. And I'm sorry, but that's the way it was supposed to be. The other people. Now,
Right.
yeah. But I mean, look at some of the ways they had to come up with it. I mean, all right, I think everybody's had a show, right? We've all talked an episode.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Hey, you know what, guys? Hey, listen. We can continue talking online, but we've been talking for an hour and a half, and I think we've hit the limit. But you know what? It's been a great panel. I love having you guys on. My regular panel, my guest panel. Hope you guys all come back again. And we need to all talk offline for next week. So with that, I'm gonna say peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.
Peace.